The unseen threat. The Galactic Senate chamber was vast, a grand structure floating in the center of the known universe. Massive pillars lined the hall, each representing an empire that had earned a seat in the ruling body. Alien diplomats, generals, and politicians filled the chamber, their voices blending into a chaotic murmur. Every species fought for power. Alliances shifted like the winds of a dying star. And yet, in the middle of all this, one seat remained untouched, Earth's seat. It was an elegant, high-backed chair made of dark metal, positioned between the seats of two great empires. But unlike the others, it was empty. It had always been empty. Kyrex, a newly appointed senator from the Talvoran Empire, sat near the front, observing the scene. He was young, ambitious, and determined to prove himself. He had studied the history of the Senate, memorized the laws, and learned the weaknesses of every species present. But one mystery remained unanswered: Earth. For centuries, humans had held a seat in the Senate, yet they never attended meetings, never sent messages, never cast a single vote. It was as if they didn't care. But if that was the case, why did no one dare to remove them? Why did the oldest senators, the ones who had served for centuries, avoid speaking about them? Kyrex had asked his mentor once, but the old senator had only shaken his head. It is best not to question Earth's silence. But Kyrex could not accept that. Today, he would get his answer. The Senate meeting began, and the Supreme Chancellor, an eight-eyed creature from the Zorvath Dominion, raised a claw to silence the room. "We gather to discuss the territorial dispute on the Orion Arm," he announced. "The Scaran Empire claims ownership, but the Volteri Republic contests it. Let us hear their arguments." As the debate began, Kyrex leaned forward, his mind elsewhere. He stared at Earth's seat, the empty throne that carried more weight than anyone was willing to admit. His curiosity burned inside him. Finally, he could hold it in no longer. He stood. "Honorable senators," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. "Before we discuss borders and trade agreements, I must ask a question that has been ignored for too long." All eyes turned to him. The Supreme Chancellor's gaze darkened. "Speak, young senator, but choose your words carefully." Kyrex pointed at the empty seat. "Why does Earth hold a seat in this chamber if they never attend?" Silence fell. The murmurs stopped. The air in the chamber grew heavy. Kyrex felt a sudden tension around him, as if he had broken an unspoken rule. Some senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others avoided eye contact. But the elder senators, those who had served for centuries, looked at him with something different. Not anger, not amusement. Fear. The Supreme Chancellor exhaled slowly. "That is a dangerous question, Senator Kyrex." "Why?" Kyrex pressed. "Earth does not participate. They do not vote. They do not interfere. What threat do they pose? If they are no longer interested in galactic politics, should we not revoke their seat?" One of the elder senators, a reptilian creature from the Drakthal Empire, spoke in a low voice. "You do not understand, young one. Their silence is not weakness." Kyrex frowned. "Then what is it?" The old senator's golden eyes locked onto his. "It is a warning." A chill ran down Kyrex's spine. A warning? From whom? The elder turned toward the empty seat. From them. Kyrex opened his mouth to argue. But another senator, an aged scholar from the Vorkan species, interrupted. His voice trembled slightly. "Earth does not attend because they do not need to. Their presence is felt without their words. Their silence is more powerful than any fleet, more terrifying than any warlord." Kyrex's mind raced. It made no sense. How could a species that refused to engage in politics hold such power? "You expect me to believe that?" he asked, his voice edged with skepticism. The Supreme Chancellor leaned forward. "You are young. You do not know what happened before the silence." Kyrex's heart pounded. "Then tell me, what happened?" The elder senators exchanged glances. Finally, The Drakthal senator sighed. If you wish to understand, you must seek the truth yourself. Kyrex's jaw tightened. And where do I begin? The Supreme Chancellor glanced at a shadowed alcove at the edge of the chamber, where a row of ancient records was stored. The Forbidden Archives, he whispered. Kyrex followed his gaze. The Forbidden Archives. A place no senator dared to enter, containing knowledge erased from history. The tension in the room grew thicker. Kyrex had started this day with a simple question. Now he had a choice. Walk away, as every senator before him had done, or take the first step into the unknown. He made his decision. Without another word, Kyrex turned and strode toward the archives. Behind him, the Senate chamber erupted into hushed whispers. He did not know what he would find. But one thing was certain. Earth's silence was not empty. It was hiding something. And whatever that was, it had terrified the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Kyrex walked through the grand halls of the Galactic Senate, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The entrance to the Forbidden Archives loomed before him. Two towering black doors with no visible handle, control panel, or security system. It was said that only those with true authority could enter, but Kyrex had studied the old ways. He placed his palm against the cold metal and spoke in the ancient dialect of the Senate. Access request. Senator Kyrex of the Salvoran Empire, seeking knowledge on Earth's silent seat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, grinding sound, the doors slowly opened. Inside, dim golden lights flickered to life, revealing towering shelves lined with holographic records. Dust hung thick in the air, as if no one had stepped foot in this place for centuries. Kyrex's heart pounded. What could be so dangerous that it was locked away, forgotten even by the most powerful species in the galaxy? He moved deeper into the archive, scanning the glowing labels of data files. Wars, treaties, lost civilizations. Then he saw it. File. The Earth Accord. Classified level Omega. Kyrex tapped the file. A hologram flickered into view. A historical record over 3,000 years old. The image of an old Vorkan senator, one of the first leaders of the Senate, appeared. His voice was slow and heavy with regret. To those who come after us, know this. The war against Earth was the Senate's greatest mistake. Kyrex's breath caught. A war. The Senate had gone to war with Earth. He had never heard of such a thing. The recording continued. We believed Earth was weak, primitive, unworthy of the power it wielded. And so, we sought to strip it from them. The scene changed, showing an armada of thousands of Senate warships descending upon Earth. Massive dreadnoughts, orbital bombardment platforms, entire fleets, the full might of the Galactic Senate. Then, the image cut to something terrifying. The war lasted less than a single Earth day. Kyrex watched in horror as Earth's defenses activated. Not planetary shields, not fleets of warships, something far worse. The enemy ships simply disappeared. No explosions, no wreckage. One by one, ships vanished without a trace, as if they had never existed. The recording continued. We still do not know what they used. Some say it was technology beyond our understanding. Others whisper of something far older, something unnatural. The image shifted again. The once mighty Senate armada was gone. Earth remained untouched, and the Senate. It had no choice but to surrender. They did not demand our surrender. The old senator's voice trembled. They simply told us this. We will not rule you, but we will watch. The recording ended abruptly. Kyrex stood frozen. The Senate hadn't given Earth a seat. It had been forced to give it to them. Earth's silence was not disinterest. It was a warning. The weight of the truth settled on Kyrex. Earth was not absent. They were watching. Kyrex stood motionless, his mind racing. Everything he thought he knew about the Senate, about Earth, had been a lie. The most powerful civilizations had once tried to dominate Earth, and failed without even understanding how. The cold realization crept over him. Earth wasn't missing from the Senate. They were above it. His hands trembled as he backed away from the archive console. He needed answers. He needed to know what had happened after the war. If Earth was so powerful, why had they never acted again? Why did they allow the Senate to continue ruling, despite its corruption and failures? Then the lights flickered. Kyrex's instincts screamed at him. He was not alone. Slowly, he turned. In the dim glow of the archive room, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A tall, cloaked being, their face hidden beneath a deep hood. But Kyrex could feel it, an overwhelming presence, like standing before the heart of a collapsing star. The figure spoke, their voice calm, yet filled with something ancient. "You were not meant to see this, Senator Kyrex." Kyrex swallowed hard. Who are you?" The figure took another step forward. A guardian of the balance. A watcher of those who stray too close to forbidden truths. Kyrex clenched his fists. "You mean Earth, don't you? You know what they really are." A silence stretched between them. Then the figure gave a slow nod. "And now so do you." Kyrex's mind was screaming at him to run, but he forced himself to stand his ground. Why does Earth stay silent? If they could wipe out entire fleets in seconds, why do they let the Senate continue ruling? The figure tilted their head. Because true power does not seek dominion. It waits. Kyrex frowned. Waits for what? The figure exhaled. For the inevitable. Kyrex felt a chill crawl down his spine. "What do you mean?" The figure turned slightly, as if listening to something unseen. Then they stepped back into the shadows. "You will understand soon enough." And just like that, they were gone. The lights returned to normal, but the weight of the encounter pressed down on Kyrex like an asteroid. He had come looking for answers, but all he had found was a deeper mystery. One thing was clear: Earth was far more dangerous than anyone realized, and the Senate's time might already be running out. Kyrex rushed out of the forbidden archives, his thoughts racing. The encounter with the hooded figure had left him shaken. A guardian, a watcher, someone, or something, was ensuring that the truth about Earth remained buried. But why? As he stepped into the grand halls of the Galactic Senate, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. At the farthest end of the chamber, where the representatives of every species sat in floating platforms, one seat remained untouched. Earth's seat. It was more than just an empty chair. It was a symbol. No banners, no holographic nameplates, no markings of any kind. Just a seat, untouched for thousands of years, left in absolute silence. Kyrex's mind flashed back to the recording. They will not rule you, but they will watch. Did the other senators know? Or had time buried the truth so deeply that only the highest-ranking officials still remembered? Determined to find out, Kyrex made his way to the private chamber of Supreme Chancellor Vorik, leader of the Senate. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. The heavy doors hissed open as Kyrex stepped inside. Chancellor Vorik, an ancient reptilian figure with gray scales and piercing yellow eyes, sat behind a vast desk of shimmering black stone. "Senator Kyrex," Vorik said, his voice slow and calculating. "You have been digging where you should not." Kyrex didn't back down. "I saw the records. I know about the war with Earth. I know why their seat remains empty." The Chancellor's gaze darkened. "Then you understand why it is best forgotten." Kyrex shook his head. "Why? If Earth is so powerful, why do they allow the Senate to exist? Why do they not interfere?" Vorik sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Because they do not need to." Kyrex frowned. "What do you mean?" The Chancellor steepled his claws. "The Senate fears Earth more than any other force in the galaxy, not because of what they did, but because of what they could do." Kyrex clenched his fists. "They ended a war in less than a day. Their technology is beyond our understanding. So why don't they do anything?" Vorik's eyes gleamed with something that Kyrex could only describe as dread. "They are waiting, Senator Kyrex. watching. They know something we do not, and when the time comes, the Senate will be powerless to stop it. Kyrex's breath caught in his throat. The Chancellor stood, walking toward the massive window that overlooked the galactic capital. For centuries, we have ruled the stars, pretending to be the highest authority. But in truth, we are nothing more than children playing in a world we do not understand. He turned back to Kyrex, his voice cold. And when Earth finally does act, it will not be to negotiate. A heavy silence filled the room. Kyrex now understood the truth. The Senate wasn't afraid of Earth's past. They were terrified of Earth's future. The weight of the Chancellor's words crushed Kyrex's thoughts like a collapsing star. They are waiting, watching. And when they act, it will not be to negotiate. It was not a threat. It was a warning. Kyrex's heart pounded as he stepped out of the chamber. He looked around at the Senate halls, at the countless representatives debating, arguing, passing meaningless laws, all while the greatest power in the galaxy remained silent in the shadows. He couldn't stay quiet. He needed more answers. But as he turned the corner, 2 armored guards stepped into his path. "Senator Kyrex," one of them said, voice devoid of emotion, "you are to come with us." His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't normal. The Senate didn't just detain its own members. Not unless they had seen something they shouldn't have. Kyrex straightened his posture, forcing calm into his voice. "On whose orders?" The second guard pressed a device on his wrist. "Supreme Chancellor Vorik." A chill ran through Kyrex. He had only left the Chancellor's chamber moments ago. Had Vorik decided that he knew too much? He had no choice. Slowly, he nodded and followed. The secret prison of the Senate. Kyrex expected to be taken to an interrogation room, maybe the High Council's chambers. But as the transport ship left the Senate's main tower, he realized something was wrong. They weren't going to any official building. They were descending, deeper into the city, past the sprawling skyline, past the layers of traffic, past even the industrial sectors, down into the depths of the planet where no sunlight reached. Few ever spoke of the lower levels of the galactic capital. It was a place of whispers, of forgotten prisons, and erased histories. When the ship finally landed, the doors hissed open to reveal an underground facility built into the rocky core of the planet. The air was stale, the walls lined with thick metal barriers reinforced with energy dampeners. Kyrex clenched his fists. This wasn't a Senate facility. This was something much older. The guards led him through dimly lit corridors, past sealed doors marked with ancient warnings in languages long extinct. He felt something pressing against his mind. Something dark, something that had been buried here for a reason. Finally, they reached a massive door. A symbol was carved into its surface, one that sent ice through Kyrex's veins. The mark of the First Galactic War. The war that had ended with Earth's silent victory. The guards input a complex series of codes, and with a deep mechanical groan, the door slowly opened. Inside, in the center of a massive chamber, sat a single prisoner. A human. Kyrex took an uneasy step forward. The prisoner sat cross-legged on the floor, wearing nothing but simple, dark robes. He looked ordinary, yet there was something unnatural about him. His presence felt heavy, like the very air bent around him. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, locked onto Kyrex the moment he stepped in. The doors slammed shut behind them. The man exhaled softly. So, the Senate finally sends someone to speak. Kyrex hesitated. This man didn't look old enough to have been part of a war thousands of years ago, but something deep inside him knew. This was no ordinary human. "Who are you?" Kyrex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man gave a small, almost amused smile. "My name does not matter. Only that I was left behind to watch." "Watch what?" The man's expression darkened. The inevitable. Kyrex felt the same chill he had in the Chancellor's office. The Senate fears Earth. They think you're waiting for something. The man tilted his head slightly. The Senate is not wrong. Kyrex clenched his fists. Waiting for what? The man studied him for a long moment. Then he finally spoke. The Senate believes it controls the galaxy, that it has conquered every major threat. He paused. They are mistaken. Kyrex's breath caught. What do you mean? The man's gaze turned to the metal walls around them. There was another war before the one you read about. A war even the Senate does not remember. A war that left the galaxy permanently scared. Kyrex shook his head. That's impossible. We have records dating back hundreds of thousands of years. The man's eyes locked onto him. Then ask yourself this. Why do your records not mention what came before the Senate? Kyrex opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. It was true. Every historical document started with the formation of the Senate. But what had existed before that? What had ruled before the so-called galactic unity? You don't mean. Kyrex started, but the man cut him off. The true rulers of the galaxy never left. The man's voice was calm, but his eyes burned with something terrifying. They simply sleep. Kyrex's heart pounded. Are you saying something else is out there? The man nodded. Earth remains silent because they know the truth. The Senate is not the real threat. The real war has not yet begun. Kyrex felt the world spin around him. Everything he knew, everything the galaxy believed, was a lie. And Earth, in its silence, had been preparing, watching. Because when the old rulers awoke, humanity would be the only ones ready to face them. Kyrex's mind reeled. The prisoner's words echoed in his skull like the tolling of a war drum. The real war has not yet begun. What did that mean? The Senate had stood for thousands of years. Every major species had risen and fallen under its rule. What could possibly exist beyond that? The prisoner, this human, sat quietly, watching him, as if waiting for the realization to sink in. Kyrex swallowed, his throat dry. If this is true, why does Earth stay silent? Why not warn the Senate? Why not prepare all of us? The prisoner exhaled softly, shaking his head. Because they already tried. Kyrex blinked. What? The prisoner's gaze hardened. The Senate was warned. Long ago. But power makes beings blind, arrogant. They believed themselves invincible, that no force could challenge them. And so, he gestured at the thick walls around them. They buried the truth, just like they buried me. Kyrex's stomach twisted. The Senate, hiding the truth. It wasn't impossible. He had seen how power-hungry the High Council had become. But still, this was different. This was terrifying. Kyrex took a shaky breath. And what exactly is this truth? The prisoner's voice dropped to a whisper. The old ones. Kyrex's blood ran cold. He had heard the myths. Every civilization had some variation of them. Whispers of ancient beings, things too vast, too powerful to comprehend. Some called them gods. Others called them monsters. But all stories ended the same way. They disappeared. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Kyrex forced himself to stay calm. You're saying these old ones still exist? The prisoner's expression did not change. Not exist. Sleep. Kyrex felt his breathing quicken. And when they wake, the human continued, the Senate will crumble in an instant. The fleets, the armies, the alliances, it will all mean nothing. He leaned forward slightly. And Earth will be the only ones who understand what must be done. Kyrex could not accept it. His entire life had been built on the Senate's history, on the belief that the galaxy was safe, that war was behind them. But this man spoke as if the true war had not even begun. Kyrex straightened. If this is true, if the Senate truly buried the truth, then why tell me? The prisoner's lips curled into the slightest smile. Because you asked the question no one else dared to. Kyrex stiffened. You are not like the others, the human continued. You see the cracks in the foundation. And now you cannot ignore them. Kyrex clenched his fists. He hated it. He hated that he could feel the truth in the prisoner's words. Because deep down, he had always known something was wrong. The Senate was too fragile, too desperate to maintain its power. He had seen how they reacted to Earth's silence, not with curiosity, but fear. And now he understood why. Earth's silence wasn't weakness. It was patience, because they were preparing for something far worse than politics. Kyrex swallowed hard. If this is true, what do I do? The prisoner's smile faded. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Find the first war. Kyrex frowned. What? The first war, the human repeated. The one the Senate erased. The one that shaped the galaxy long before its so-called unity. Kyrex's pulse quickened. Where do I start? The prisoner leaned back, closing his eyes. There is a place, a world long forgotten. A graveyard of something far older than the Senate. His eyes opened again, sharp and deadly. Go to the Dead Star. Kyrex inhaled sharply. He knew that name. Everyone in the galaxy did. It was a world stripped of all life, orbiting a collapsed star at the edge of the known galaxy. No ships returned from there. No probes sent back data. It was nothing but a cursed void, a place that should not exist. Kyrex's voice was hoarse. What's there? The prisoner's expression darkened. The beginning of everything. Kyrex stood at the viewport, staring into the abyss of space. The Dead Star loomed ahead, a dark, crumbling husk of a world orbiting a collapsed sun. No light touched its surface. No signals escaped its atmosphere. It was as if the planet itself had been erased from existence. He clenched his fists. For his entire life, the Senate had whispered of this place in fearful tones. They called it a graveyard, a cursed void, a warning of what happens to civilizations that defy the natural order. But now, Kyrex knew the truth. The Senate wasn't afraid of what happened here. They were afraid of what still remained. His ship's AI crackled to life. Warning: unstable gravitational anomalies detected. Extreme caution advised. Kyrex exhaled. Noted. He activated the ship's descent thrusters and pushed forward. The closer he got, the more his instruments failed. Navigation flickered, sensors died, and comms turned to static. It was as if the very laws of physics rejected his presence. And yet, he continued. Through the thick, swirling atmosphere. Through the eerie silence. Through the crushing pressure of something ancient watching him. Until finally, his ship broke through the clouds. And he saw it. Kyrex stood frozen, the prisoner's words hammering in his mind. The beginning of everything. He could feel the weight of the human's gaze on him as the chamber's cold air pressed in. The Dead Star was a name that haunted the edges of every galactic map, a place that no one dared to approach, for it was said to consume everything it touched. The prisoner's voice broke through his thoughts. You can't remain here forever, Kyrex. The Senate will never let you go once they realize what you know. You must go now. Kyrex hesitated. His mind raced, but his body remained still. He had always believed that the Senate was the center of the galaxy, the uncontested ruler of the stars. But now he understood that they had built their empire on lies, silencing truths that stretched far beyond their reach. What's waiting for me there? He asked, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to stay calm. The prisoner's eyes softened, but only slightly. A key to understanding what the Senate has tried to bury. If you're strong enough to face what's hidden there, you may discover what Earth has known all along. Kyrex looked into the human's eyes, searching for any sign of deception. But there was none, only certainty. The prisoner knew the truth that had been buried for millennia. I can't do this alone. Kyrex muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The Senate will stop me. If I go to the Dead Star, they'll hunt me down. They'll kill me before I can even get close. The prisoner leaned forward, his voice steady. They will try. But Earth has ways of moving unseen, ways that the Senate can't understand. Kyrex's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of what he was about to do, an act that would change everything. The Senate, Earth, the entire galaxy, nothing would ever be the same. How? Kyrex whispered. How do I get to the dead star? The prisoner smiled faintly. You will not be alone. There are others who know what's at stake. They will help you. Kyrex's eyes narrowed. Others? Who are they? The human's smile faded, replaced with a cold, knowing expression. They are the ones who have been waiting, watching. The remnants of the old war. Kyrex took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. It was dangerous. It was terrifying. But it was the only way to uncover the truth. With one last glance at the prisoner, Kyrex turned and walked toward the exit. As the door opened, he felt the weight of the galaxy's secrets pressing down on him. The prisoner's voice echoed after him. The galaxy is about to change, Kyrex. You have no idea how deep this goes. Outside, the cold winds of the capital city slapped his face. He had made his decision. The journey to the dead star had begun. But as he looked up at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that his every move was being watched. Not by the Senate, but by something much older, much darker. The universe had always been a vast, unknowable place. But now Kyrex realized that there was more to it than anyone had ever understood. The dead star was waiting. And when he found it, he would uncover the truth that could tear the galaxy apart. The empty seat. The Galactic Senate was in session. The Grand Hall, larger than any human city, was filled with voices from hundreds of alien species. Some had come from the coldest planets, their bodies covered in thick fur. Others were from worlds bathed in endless fire, their forms glowing like molten metal. They all gathered to decide the fate of the universe. In the center of the hall was a massive circular table, and at that table sat representatives from every powerful civilization. But one seat remained empty. It had always been empty. A young ambassador named Keltar, from the Yelthian Dominion, noticed the empty seat. It was large, more advanced than the others, as if it had been prepared for someone important. But no one had ever seen it occupied. Keltar turned to the senator beside him, an old reptilian named Vorak. Why is Earth's seat always empty? He asked. The noise in the chamber faded. Conversation stopped. Some aliens exchanged nervous glances, while others pretended they hadn't heard the question. Vorak sighed, his golden eyes narrowing. You should not ask that. Keltar frowned. But Earth is a member of the Senate, is it not? Their seat is here. Their symbol is on the records. And yet, no human has ever spoken in these halls. A deep voice rumbled from across the table. It belonged to Senator Threx, a being from the warlike Rothian Empire. Because Earth never needed us, he said, his voice like distant thunder. And we never dared to ask why. Keltar felt a chill run down his spine. He had studied humans. They were a young race, barely a few thousand years into space travel. Their homeworld, Earth, was considered a minor planet, beautiful but unremarkable. Compared to the ancient empires of the galaxy, they were nothing. And yet their seat was there, waiting, untouched. He leaned forward. What happened? Vorak's claws tapped against the table. A long time ago, the Senate invited Earth to join us. Unlike others, they did not beg for a seat. They did not demand power or influence. Threx nodded. They simply listened to our offer and said no. Keltar blinked. No. We decline, Vorak repeated. That was their exact response. The chamber was silent now. Some senators shifted uncomfortably, while others looked away, pretending to study their data tablets. Keltar shook his head in disbelief. But why? Threx exhaled, his large hands clenching into fists. That, he said, is the question that keeps us awake at night. A soft hum filled the chamber as a holographic screen appeared in the air. It showed an old recording, the moment Earth had been invited to the Senate. In the projection, A group of human diplomats stood before the Senate Council. They were calm, their expressions unreadable. The High Chancellor of the Senate, an elder being with glowing blue skin, had offered them a seat among the stars. The lead human, a tall woman with sharp eyes, had simply smiled. "We appreciate the offer," she had said, "but we must decline." The Chancellor had leaned forward. "Do you not understand what this means? This is an honor, a chance to shape the future of the galaxy." The woman's smile had never faded. "We understand." Then the recording ended. Kelter stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. He felt a strange unease growing inside him. No species had ever rejected the Senate's offer. To do so was unthinkable. "What happened after that?" he asked. Vorek's voice was grim. "Nothing. They left. They returned to their planet and never spoke of it again." Kelter frowned. "And the Senate? Surely they tried to convince Earth." Frex let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, we tried. We sent envoys. We sent trade offers. We even considered sending warships to force them into compliance." Kelter's breath caught. "And?" Frex's eyes darkened. "Every attempt failed." Vorak nodded. "We do not speak of it, but those who tried to challenge Earth, they were never seen again." Kelter felt his heart pounding. He had expected a simple answer. Maybe political disagreements, maybe internal human conflicts. But this was something else. He looked again at the empty seat. For the first time, he felt as though it was not abandoned, but waiting. Waiting for what? Or worse, for who? The chamber remained silent. No one spoke. No one dared to. And Kelter realized the most terrifying truth of all. The Galactic Senate did not exclude Earth. Earth excluded the Galactic Senate. And no one knew why. Centuries ago, the Galactic Senate had been certain of one thing: Earth would accept their invitation. Every new species that reached the stars saw the Senate as the ultimate goal. It was the center of power, the ruling body that controlled trade, diplomacy, and even war. To be part of it meant influence, protection, and access to the greatest technologies in the galaxy. So when humanity achieved interstellar travel, the Senate had sent an official delegation. Their orders were simple: bring Earth into the fold. The delegation arrived in Earth's orbit with a fleet of golden ambassador ships, shining like beacons of civilization. They'd broadcast their message in every known language, expecting excitement, gratitude, perhaps even desperation. Instead, they were met with silence. No grand ceremonies, no celebrations, just a single reply from Earth's leadership: "We will meet you on neutral ground." The Senate had been surprised, but they agreed. A diplomatic station was chosen, orbiting a quiet moon far from Earth. The stage was set for history. The Senate's highest officials sat in a grand chamber, waiting. Ornate banners of the most powerful empires draped from the walls. They had done this before, many times, in fact. Usually, by this point, the new species would have already sent gifts, asked questions, and begged for favor. But when the doors opened, the humans did none of these things. They did not arrive in a massive procession. They'd brought no gifts, no tributes. They walked in calmly, dressed in simple but elegant suits. Their leader, a woman with piercing eyes and an unreadable expression, took her seat at the negotiating table. The Chancellor of the Senate, a towering being with sapphire-colored skin, spoke first. His voice carried authority, the weight of centuries of rulership. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," he said. "This is a momentous day. You stand at the threshold of history." The human woman gave a polite nod, but said nothing. The Chancellor continued. "The Galactic Senate extends its hand in friendship. We offer you a place among the stars, a seat at our table, and the chance to shape the destiny of the universe. This is a rare honor." The Senate members leaned forward, waiting for humanity's answer. The human woman simply smiled. "We appreciate the offer," she said, "but we must decline. It took several seconds for anyone to react. A low murmur spread through the chamber. Some of the more impatient species exchanged confused glances. Others looked at the humans as if they had misheard. The Chancellor's expression remained calm, but there was a hint of disbelief in his tone. "I do not think you understand," he said slowly. "This is not just an invitation. It is a privilege. Every species that has reached the stars has joined us. The Senate is the foundation of galactic order. Without us, your people would be alone, vulnerable." The human woman's eyes remained steady. "We understand." The murmurs grew louder. A senator from the warlike Krail Dominion slammed his fist onto the table. "Then why refuse?" Her answer was simple. "Because we do not need you." The murmurs stopped. Every being in the room stared at the humans. No species had ever said such words before. The Chancellor's smile remained, but there was now a cold edge to it. "You do not need us." The woman nodded. "Earth will stand on its own." For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Senate was speechless. The meeting ended quickly after that. The humans left as calmly as they had arrived, their unreadable expressions never changing. They did not ask for technology, alliances, or protection. They simply walked away. For weeks, the Senate debated their response. Some argued that Earth's arrogance could not be ignored. Others believed humanity had made a foolish mistake and would soon beg for reconsideration. But decades passed. Earth never asked again. And the most unsettling part, they never needed to. Something was different about humanity. Something the Senate did not understand. And that, more than anything else, terrified them. The whispers never stopped. Across the Galactic Senate, across the great civilizations of the universe, the story of Earth's refusal spread like wildfire. Species that had spent centuries fighting for a seat in the Senate could not understand why humans had so easily walked away. Some believed it was arrogance. Others feared it was something far worse. The Senate did not take rejection lightly. In its long history, no species had ever refused its offer. Those who hesitated were convinced. Those who resisted were persuaded. The Senate was the foundation of the galaxy's order, and it did not tolerate chaos. Yet Earth remained untouched. For years, silent envoys were sent, not official ambassadors, but spies, analysts, observers. They infiltrated human colonies, watched their development, studied their technology. What they found was unsettling. Earth was advancing at an unnatural speed. While other species took millennia to climb from their first interstellar flights to stable galactic presence, humans had achieved it in mere centuries. Their fleets were growing, their science accelerating. But the most concerning part was their silence. They did not reach out, did not seek alliances, did not ask for knowledge. They simply built. In the shadows, away from prying eyes, they expanded, preparing for something unknown. The Senate's patience grew thin. Some called for force, a show of strength to remind humanity of its place. Others advised caution, arguing that Earth's secrecy was not ignorance, but a warning. The final decision was made by the High Chancellor himself. A delegation would be sent, not with an invitation this time, but a demand. Earth would explain itself, or the Senate would act. The fleet arrived in Sol with the full authority of the Senate behind it. Massive warships, enough to bring entire star systems to their knees, positioned themselves at the edge of the system. Humanity had ignored diplomacy. They would not ignore power. But as they entered the system, something happened that had never occurred in the history of the Senate's conquests. The moment the first Senate ship crossed into human territory, every system on board went dark. Shields, weapons, engines, all of it failed instantly. Panic spread through the fleet. The crews worked frantically, trying to understand what was happening. And then, for the first time in centuries, the Senate received a transmission from Earth. One sentence: "You should not have come here." The transmission ended. The fleet was left stranded, powerless, drifting in the cold void. And as the helpless ships floated in silence, a new presence appeared on their sensors. Earth's fleet had arrived. It did not announce itself. It did not open communications. It simply watched. And for the first time, the Galactic Senate understood true fear. The stranded Senate fleet drifted helplessly, their once mighty warships reduced to lifeless metal hulks. Crews scrambled to restore power, but nothing responded. Their weapons were useless, their defenses shattered before a single shot had been fired. The silence of space pressed in around them, broken only by the steady beeping of failing systems. Then the human fleet moved. It was nothing like the Senate's fleets, which were built for display as much as war. The Senate's ships were grand, gilded with symbols of power, designed to intimidate. Humanity's ships were different. They were dark, angular, and efficient. There were no unnecessary adornments, no wasted space. Every inch of their design spoke of purpose, of function over form. And there were so many of them. The Senate commanders had always believed their fleet was among the most powerful in the galaxy. Yet as they watched the human warships glide into position, they realized the truth. Their own forces were nothing compared to this. The sheer number of human ships was overwhelming, and worse, their formations were precise, calculated. They did not move with the arrogance of conquerors, but with the cold efficiency of predators. Aboard the Senate's flagship, the High Commander clenched his fists. They had been given no warning, no negotiation, no chance to explain. This was not diplomacy. This was control. The humans had disabled their fleet in an instant, and now they simply watched, waiting. But for what? A new transmission came through. But this time it was not just a simple warning. It was an invitation. "Step aboard," the voice said. "Alone." The High Commander hesitated. To leave his ship, to board an enemy vessel without guards, was suicide. Yet, what choice did he have? Their fleet was dead in space, and the humans had made it clear they could end them at any moment. With no other options, he accepted. A single human vessel approached, its design sleek and unfamiliar. As he stepped onto its surface, he felt something strange. Gravity, identical to his homeworld's. The air was crisp, breathable, carefully controlled. The humans had prepared for him. Waiting inside was a single human, seated at a simple metal table. There were no grand thrones, no elaborate decorations, just two chairs, a dim light above them, and an atmosphere thick with something the High Commander had never felt before. Not fear, not hostility, something worse, a quiet certainty. The human gestured to the empty seat. "Sit." And for the first time in his life, the High Commander obeyed without question. The High Commander sat across from the human, his rigid posture betraying the tension in his body. The room was unnervingly simple. No grand banners, no displays of power, just cold metal and dim lighting. The air was sterile, controlled, yet it carried an undeniable weight. The human before him was calm, composed, completely unbothered by the presence of one of the most powerful military leaders in the Senate. The silence stretched between them, thick and oppressive. The High Commander had been in countless negotiations, had faced warlords and emperors, had led campaigns that decided the fate of entire species. Yet in this moment, he felt like a child. Finally, the human spoke. "Why are you here?" The question was direct, without ceremony. The High Commander bristled at the casual tone, but held his composure. "You know why," he said, his voice firm. "The Senate will not tolerate isolationism. No species can afford to stand alone, not in this galaxy." The human leaned forward slightly, folding his hands together. "You misunderstand. We are not alone." The word sent a chill through the High Commander's spine. "You refused our invitation," he pressed. "That was an insult to the Senate. And now you disable our fleet without warning. This is an act of aggression." The human raised an eyebrow. "Aggression? Your fleet entered our space uninvited, fully armed. We simply turned off the lights." The High Commander clenched his jaw. The way the human spoke, so calmly, so assuredly, made his skin crawl. They had crippled an entire battle fleet without firing a shot. No warnings, no demands, just complete control. The human continued, his voice measured. The Senate believes itself to be the center of the galaxy. That without it, chaos would reign. That every species must either be part of your order or be crushed beneath it. Tell me, how many civilizations have you forced into submission under the guise of diplomacy? The High Commander's fists tightened. We bring order. We prevent war. The galaxy thrives under our guidance. The human let out a quiet breath, almost like a sigh. No, you bring control. There's a difference. The High Commander opened his mouth to argue, but the human raised a hand, stopping him. Tell me, Commander, why do you think Earth refused? The question was simple, yet it carried a weight that made the High Commander hesitate. Every species that had been offered a seat in the Senate had accepted. Even the most stubborn had eventually submitted. It was logical. It was the way of things. And yet, humanity had walked away. Not just walked away. They had thrived. The silence dragged on as the High Commander searched for an answer. The human tilted his head. I'll tell you why. Because we watched. We listened. We saw what happened to those who joined you. Their leaders became your puppets. Their cultures bent to your rules. Their advancements became yours to control. And those who resisted, the human's gaze darkened. They were erased. The High Commander kept his expression neutral, but deep down, a flicker of unease stirred. The human leaned back, watching him carefully. You assume that because every species before us has accepted your rule, we would do the same. That we would beg for a place at your table. But you never considered that we might build our own. The High Commander exhaled sharply. You are making a mistake. The Senate does not take defiance lightly. A small smile played on the human's lips. Neither do we. The words were not spoken as a threat, but they carried a quiet certainty that sent another chill down the High Commander's spine. He had come here expecting arrogance, desperation, maybe even fear, but there was none of that. These humans were not reckless. They were not ignorant. They knew exactly what they were doing. The realization was unsettling. For the first time, the High Commander considered the possibility that the Senate had miscalculated. That humanity was not just another civilization to be brought under control. That they might be something else entirely. The human stood, signaling that the conversation was over. You will be returned to your ship. Your fleet will be restored. You will go back to your Senate and tell them what you saw. The High Commander narrowed his eyes. And if we return with more ships, with an armada? The human smile didn't waver. Then we will turn off the lights again. And next time, we might not turn them back on. The room suddenly felt colder. The High Commander rose, keeping his face emotionless, but his mind was racing. He had come expecting to intimidate humanity, to force them into submission. Instead, he was leaving with a deep, unsettling truth. Humanity had not just rejected the Senate. They had outgrown it, and that terrified him more than anything. The High Commander returned to his ship in silence. As he stepped onto the bridge, the familiar glow of restored power illuminated the once lifeless consoles. Systems were back online, weapons functional, engines operational. It was as if nothing had happened, except everything had changed. The crew looked at him, waiting for orders, for an explanation, for anything. But he had none. He simply gave the command to retreat. The great Senate fleet, the symbol of galactic order, turned and fled from human space without a single shot fired. As the ships accelerated away from the Sol system, an uneasy tension settled over the fleet. No one spoke of what had happened. No one dared to ask why they had been allowed to leave. The silence was suffocating. The High Commander sat in his private chamber, replaying the conversation in his mind. Every word, every subtle expression, every calculated movement of the human across from him. He had faced warlords, conquerors, and tyrants. He knew how to read enemies. He knew when someone was bluffing. But the humans weren't bluffing. They had disabled an entire battle fleet as easily as flipping a switch. That alone was terrifying. But what disturbed him more was their confidence. They hadn't threatened, they hadn't postured, they had simply stated facts. They had watched the Senate for years, studied its methods, understood its weaknesses. And then, they had chosen to walk away. That was the part he couldn't grasp. Why? Power was the natural currency of the universe. Every species, no matter how advanced, sought influence, control, security. The Senate was the greatest authority in the galaxy, the ultimate structure of order. Every species that had risen to prominence had fought for a place within it, except for humanity. They had seen it, understood it, and rejected it outright. And yet, they hadn't isolated themselves. They hadn't struggled. Instead, they had thrived, grown, advanced at an impossible rate. They had built something the Senate couldn't comprehend, power beyond its reach. A chime interrupted his thoughts. A secure transmission from the Senate High Council. He straightened, composing himself before accepting the call. The image of the Senate chamber flickered into view. Rows of alien leaders, their faces stern, expectant. The Supreme Chancellor leaned forward. "High Commander, you were sent to bring Earth into compliance. What is your report?" He hesitated for just a moment, long enough for the sharp-eyed politicians to notice. He could tell them the truth. He could warn them that Earth was not what they believed, that humanity was no simple upstart civilization, but something far more dangerous. Or he could lie. He cleared his throat. Earth refused. Their leaders are stubborn, but their forces are insignificant, a minor nuisance. The Supreme Chancellor narrowed his eyes. And the fleet's sudden return. A tactical retreat, the High Commander said smoothly, to reassess our approach. The humans rely on technological tricks, nothing more. We will adapt, and when the time comes, they will kneel before the Senate. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Chancellor studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then we will prepare for war. Humanity will learn its place. The transmission ended, leaving the High Commander alone once more. He exhaled slowly, his hands tightening into fists. They wouldn't listen. They had no idea what they were walking into. For the first time in his life, the High Commander felt something unfamiliar creeping into his mind. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was fear. The Senate had made its decision. Humanity would be brought to its knees. Across the galaxy, fleets mobilized. War councils gathered in secret chambers. Strategists dissected every known detail about Earth, and weapons of unimaginable power were prepared. The Senate was vast, its resources limitless. It had crushed countless rebellions, conquered entire star systems, and absorbed the greatest civilizations into its order. Humanity would be no different, or so they believed. A High Commander stood aboard the bridge of the Senate's Grand Armada, a force so immense that it could blot out the stars. Thousands of warships stretched across space, their weapons primed, their engines humming with the anticipation of war. Yet, deep inside, the High Commander felt no triumph, only dread. He had seen Earth's defiance firsthand. He had spoken to their leaders, looked into their eyes, and glimpsed something the Senate had failed to understand. Humanity was not afraid, not desperate, not reckless. They were prepared. The fleet surged forward, piercing into human-controlled space. There were no immediate signs of resistance. No defense fleets met them. No planetary shields activated, just the cold, empty void stretching before them. The Senate admirals took it as a sign of weakness. They advanced with confidence, pressing deeper, scanning for threats. And then the stars went out. One by one, ships began vanishing from the sensors. Communications fell silent. Engines failed without explanation. Weapons refused to fire. The fleet, the mightiest force in the known universe, was being dismantled piece by piece, without a single shot being fired. Panic spread through the ranks. Orders were shouted, emergency protocols activated, but nothing worked. The fleet was no longer in control of itself. And then a voice rang out across every ship, every speaker, every emergency frequency. A single human voice, calm and unwavering. You were warned. The High Commander's blood turned to ice. He turned to the main viewport and saw them, human ships, emerging from the void, sleek and silent. Not in thousands, not in fleets, but in dozens, just a fraction of the numbers the Senate had sent. And yet they held all the power. One by one, Senate warships powered down completely, their systems locked, their weapons disabled. The Grand Armada, the pride of the Senate, had been rendered powerless in mere moments. The human voice spoke again. The Senate believes itself invincible, that its rule is absolute, that resistance is futile. Today, you learn the truth. A moment of silence followed, stretching unbearably. Then the human voice delivered the final blow. You were never in control. And with that, the fate of the Senate was sealed.